members, can we then I take it that we those apologies is read. What's that sound now? Moratsetla?
No, Chair, I wanted to move that we accept the apologies.
Oh, okay. Any seconder then?
Chair, seconded.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosina. On the agenda, we are having we will be briefed by the department on the analysis, implications and impact of the President's SONA. And then after that, we are going to be briefed on the updated status on the BELA bill in terms of processing and also the preparations of the public hearings as we are moving to provinces, starting from this weekend. So this is how our agenda is. Can I then have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda?
Chairperson.
Yes, and Moratsetla.
Once more, I rise to move that this agenda be accepted and adopted as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any seconder?
Chair,
good morning, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, the DM, DG, and the team, and our parliamentary staff. I move to second the move to adopt the agenda as it is. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Adwans. Because that is now the agenda. Without wasting time, DM, can I allow you to do a political overview? Thank you, DM.
Recording in progress.
Chairperson, thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning to you and greetings to all the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, and want to thank this opportunity to come before the Portfolio Committee to come and present the analysis, implications and impact of the SONA on the budget of the year 2022, 23, 24. So we, as the department, currently, we are in a healthy state, if I may put it. We're in a healthy state, except some pockets of issues that will happen here and there, accidents which will involve learners on scholar transport, sometimes bullying that is happening in schools among our teenagers, and of course, the floods that are taking place in the old Transvaal, if I may put it, because the provinces that are affected will be Gauteng, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, part of Northwest, which are the provinces that are within the old Transvaal. That's why I'm saying that. But so far, yes, there are floods, especially in the area of Nkomazi local municipality, because all the rivers are moving down to the Indian Ocean, to Mozambique. So some learners do not access schooling, and some they even risk to want to cross the flooding bridges, which is a challenge. But we did issue statements that they must not, if really where you used to cross, you find that it's full, don't attempt to cross that. So like in the Eastern Cape, Coffee Bay area, schools, learners are affected, where 2 people died due to trying to cross rivers. In KZN also, yeah, because the rain affected also KwaZulu-Natal. So that's what is affecting us. But generally, the sector, education sector is in a healthy state, except those few pockets, which the president, of course, has declared the state of disaster in terms of the floods. Roads have been wiped. We can criticize, but these are the repercussions of the climate change. So, Chair, we are here today, and I know that what I'm talking about is going to affect, of course, the budget. What I'm talking about over more than even the SONA itself, because what is contained in SONA is nothing, there's nothing that is new that comes from wherever. All the things that the president speaks about in his SONA, they emanate from the cabinet level. And in cabinet, all ministers are there and their entities. So there can be nothing that comes out of the mind of the president to say, I just think of talking about this. When he mentions things about early childhood development, it will obviously emanate from the department itself. Then the president, of course, might give a directive in that cabinet to say, this is what I want to see. And it will never be a surprise that we say now it's not in the budget, because the process of APPs are not done yet, concluded yet. So the financial year will start on the 1st of April. So, which means all the issues that emanated from SOPA should be incorporated in the SONA of the president, should be incorporated in the plans of departments, because even yourselves, Chair, in the portfolio committee, we have not yet started with the process of approving our APPs. So when we bring the APPs, you must also check if we've incorporated everything that the president has said about the department. But now I'm with the team, Basic Education Chair. With your permission, maybe if I can allow the DG and his team to present. It's not a long presentation, but they've coined it correctly that and simply that members will be able to follow. With your permission, Chair, if you allow the DG to come in. Thank you.
Yes, DG, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, honorable members, Honorable Deputy Minister. Thank you for an appropriate and very comprehensive overview. We do not only encapsulate the SONA pronouncements in the APP, but we take them down to performance agreements of all the starting with senior managers in the department, SMS members, and then middle managers and frontline workers and the rest of the employees of the department. We also translate this into line function operational plans. That's how we take the SONA commitments. So the presentation it's essentially about the analysis, the implications, and the impact of the President's 2023 SONA. But we look at this by reflecting on strategic priorities. We also include the introduction, which is our mantra, essentially what we use in most instances when we present on our performance, because this introduction provides strategic direction to us that there are three cardinal areas that we really need to focus on in improving the performance of the system. And Dr. Stephen Taylor will briefly go through that. We also track the implementation of the SONA commitments. Managers who are responsible for each of these commitments are in the meeting to provide whatever information that is required. But Dr. Stephen Taylor, who's the head of our research in the department, will lead the presentation. We meet every month where I play the role of the minister and the deputy minister and oversight structures of parliament. And each of the managers would then present and questions would be asked on progress made in terms of implementing the SONA commitments. As the deputy minister correctly pointed out, it's a very short presentation of 39 slides. We usually present very long presentations, but for today, it's very short. We'll juxtapose the 2023 SONA pronouncements and commitments with previous SONAs. If you allow me, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, and Honorable Deputy Minister and colleagues, to then invite Dr. Stephen Taylor to take the meeting through the presentation. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, DG, and good morning, Honourable Chairperson, Deputy Minister, and Honourable members of the Portfolio Committee. If I may just share my screen, please do let me know if you cannot see it, and if you do not see it in the right view, should be showing in a moment.
Do slideshow, Steve.
Yes,
Otherwise it's up.
It should be up. Can you see it yet in slideshow mode?
Not as yet. It is up, but not slideshow.
Okay. Okay, it should be showing slideshow now.
Yes, indeed. You can proceed.
Wonderful. Thank you, DG, and good morning again, honourable members. So the DG introduced the presentation quite adequately, pointing out that it's going to consider an analysis of the SONA, the implications of the SONA, and the impact of the SONA on the sector. The background will be covered in the first section of the presentation. We'll also contextualize the SONA in terms of the progress that has been seen in the sector in recent years. We'll show how the SONA contributes to give direction to government priorities in the context of other plans and priorities. We'll analyze this year's SONA in particular, but we'll also compare and take stock of recent SONAs and report on the various progress that has been made against recent SONAs, which also has implications for the progress being made relative to the latest pronouncements in the SONA. So the purpose, as mentioned, is to present the analysis, implications, and impact of the President's SONA to the Portfolio Committee. This is just an extract from the National Development Plan, which points out that by 2030, South Africans should have access to education and training of the highest quality, leading to significantly improved learning outcomes. So learning outcomes is clearly at the core of all our plans, especially the long-term plan of the National Development Plan, and international standardized tests are mentioned there, as in many of our plans, as an important way of measuring progress in our learning outcomes. As the DG mentioned, in the department, we regularly report on progress against the SONA pronouncements on a quarterly and even more often than quarterly basis within the DBE, and we submit progress reports to Presidency. So the background is important to understand the SONA relative to all the other plans and commitments in the sector. As I mentioned, the long-term plan of the National Development Plan is there, It feeds into the 5-year medium-term strategic framework for government, which includes a chapter on education. Those long-term plans also feed into the sector plan for basic education, known as the action plan. Currently, it is to 2024. All these long-term plans give effect to and direction to departmental plans. The DBE and provincial departments have 5-year strategic plans, and those in turn give direction to annual plans, annual performance plans. At the same time, we do have international commitments, such as the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 around education, and even continental commitments in terms of the African Union's agenda of 2063. And so it's in that context that the annual State of the Nation address gives further prioritization and direction to the sector on an annual basis, as well as reporting on progress that has been made in the sector. We do our own progress reports, sector reviews periodically to assess long-term progress in the sector, as well as annual reports, which reports against the annual performance plans of the departments. Looking at the MTSF for the education is highlighted there. There are 5 kind of key goals or outcomes for government, and the 4th one relates to basic education, namely that our schools will have better educational outcomes, and every 10-year-old will be able to read for meaning. So it's important to note that the MTSF as a whole singles out this important early learning area of reading. If we turn now to the chapter in the MTSF on education, there are 5 key outcome areas. They're organized in terms of the phases of schooling. And then the 5th outcome area is across all phases of schooling, which is school infrastructure. The first outcome is the earliest phase of the system around ECD, which targets improved school readiness amongst children. The second outcome area in the MTSF for education is about the foundation phase education and foundations for learning, again, singling out the goal for all 10-year-old learners to be able to read for meaning. The third outcome looks at the intermediate and senior phase and looks for outcomes from the grade 9 level onwards, namely that youth should be better prepared for further studies in the world of work. The 4th outcome focuses more on the FET phase and targets youth leaving the school system more prepared to contribute towards a prosperous and equitable South Africa. And then, as mentioned, the 5th area is around school infrastructure. This diagram highlights the action plan, which is the sector plan to 2024. As with previous sector plans, this is the 3rd of its kind. There are 27 goals, and these goals are very much aligned to the other plans, the NDP and the MTSF. The first 13 goals all have to do with improving learning outcomes. So these are the goals which are about the outcomes of the basic education system, which is learning. So the goals, for instance, in the early grades are around grade 3 literacy and numeracy. It moves through the system to look at matric outcomes, such as the numbers of grade 12 bachelor passes, the number of maths and science passes, for example. And then goals 14 to 27 are all about how we are going to achieve those learning outcomes. These are goals related to the things we need to do in the sector and measuring progress in those areas that are supposed to be drivers of improvement. Examples are ensuring that all schools receive the minimum funding allocated, improving school infrastructure, improving teacher job satisfaction and professionalization, avoiding excessively large classes, to name a few of the goals. So those are the long-term sector plans. How have we been doing in recent years? If we look at all of the of UNESCO's 6 widely acknowledged dimensions for education quality, namely access, redress, equity, equality, efficiency, and inclusivity. Pretty much on all of these indicators, the long-term trend in South Africa is positive. Whether it is the percentage of young children gaining access to early childhood development opportunities, or whether it is completion rates of primary school or completion rates of grade 12 or access to university, all of these indicators have been improving over time. They've been becoming more equitable, with improvements driven mainly from the historically more disadvantaged parts of the system. There's even been improvements on quality. At the same time as we've seen increased access to schooling and participation in schooling, we have also seen improvements in international assessments such as TIMSS, PILS, and SACMEC, which measure the quality of reading or maths or science outcomes at a particular grade level. And all of these assessments have been revealing improvements over the last 15 to 20 years. Of course, we do know and acknowledge that the overall level of quality is still low and unequal, but it's important to understand that it has been improving, even though it is not where we want it to be at. I mentioned the TIMSS study, the Trends in International Maths and Science study. The latest one was 2019, and we've been seeing improvements since 2002 in this study. In 2002, for example, only 10.5% of grade 9 learners achieved a minimum proficiency level in mathematics, and this has increased to 41% by 2019, which, although it's not where we want it to be, it's amongst the fastest improving countries, if not the fastest improving country in the TIMSS assessment. And similarly, the PILS results, which speak about reading, have improved since 2006 to 2011 and to 2016. We've had improvements. We still have low overall levels of learning. And the committee may also be interested to note that the next PILS assessment is coming out later this year. The data was collected in 2021. And of course, we hope to see continued improvements, but we're also aware that not only in South Africa, but for many of the countries participating in PILS, there's a question about the impact of the pandemic. The data was collected late in 2021, so would have been just at the wrong time in terms of being substantially affected by the disruptions to schooling that the pandemic created. So turning towards what we know about the impact of the pandemic, because this is, of course, a big part of the context in the school system at the moment. In South Africa, as with in many countries, almost all countries, a lot of teaching time was lost in 2020 and in 2021 with rotational timetabling in our case. It seems as if the most affected group of children were actually the younger children. The biggest drops in attendance rates at educational institutions were observed amongst young children, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. They were less likely to attend ECD programs. There was perhaps a delaying of entry into grade R and into grade 1. But what is interesting to note was that despite some of the initial concerns and fears around dropping out of school, as the statistics have been coming out, we actually have seen that the participation rates amongst older learners, 16 to 18-year-olds, was actually increased during the pandemic. And we think this is partly because of the lower grade repetition rates that we saw at the end of 2020 and 2021, with meaning that more learners were retained in the system, more learners progressed from grades 10 to 11 and 12. And as a result, that is why we've seen more NSC candidates in the last couple of years. In 2022, we saw more candidates, more passes, more bachelor passes than ever before. So there does seem to be an improved efficiency, perhaps almost an unintended benefit coming out of the pandemic, with better retention in the system, more candidates having the opportunity to write the NSC exams, and many of them passing. And so the longer term negative impact of the pandemic seems to have been on learning, especially in the early grades. We have seen in the areas of reading and the areas of maths, samples from certain provinces have shown quite significant learning losses. for children in specific early grades compared to the same grades before the pandemic. And this is likely to be the long-term challenge for the sector as we recover learning losses. But despite the big challenges of the pandemic, the system proved resilient. And the NSC results of 2022, I think, are perhaps the best example of that, where, as mentioned, we've seen more candidates, more passes, more bachelor passes than ever before. Some of the statistics are highlighted here, and the president also spent some time on the NSC results in the SONA. We saw, if we look at the long-term trends, there's been a doubling of passes since 1994. We continue to see that girls make up most of the NSC passes. Girls are much more likely to reach grade 12, more likely to write the NSC exams than boys, to the extent that there's actually a concern around the performance of boy learners now. We've seen more learners qualifying for higher education, including even amongst the so-called progressed learners. We've seen more learners in correctional services writing and passing the NSC, more learners with special needs who are getting bachelor passes as well. And importantly, the biggest improvements in the system have been from amongst Black African learners and quintile 1 to 3 schools. And the president actually referred to this, calling it something of a silent revolution. So turning towards the SONA now, as the DG mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, the SONA does set key government priorities and deliverables. It determines the priorities of the DBE. It commits us in public to pursuing key activities and outcomes. It's important, therefore, for us as a department to align what we're doing to the pronouncements in the SONA, and not only for us as the department, but for the sector as a whole. SONA, of course, also is an opportunity to reflect on progress, and the president did do that, especially around the NSC results. So to just quickly show the exact words that the president spoke in relation to education in this year's SONA, he spent quite a bit of time on early childhood development, as he has done in recent years, pointing out the need for very young children to develop the very early learning foundations they need, and moving on to highlight some of the developments in the sector around streamlining the requirements for ECD centers to access the subsidy. And there's been important work that's been happening there and is likely to substantially increase the number of children who can benefit from the subsidy. He spoke about infrastructure, highlighting again the SAFE initiative and the ECD initiative, which have been flagship programs for him and have featured prominently in recent years' SONAs. He also spoke about the need to expand the country's vocational education and training systems, including through the 3 streams model. And he spoke quite a bit about the matric results of 2022, highlighting some of the statistics showing improvements in line with what I've already shared. So how does this year's SONA compare to recent SONAs? What we've done here is created so-called bubble charts, where the size of the bubble is a reflection of the amount of words devoted to particular topics in the SONA. And we've done this kind of bubble chart analysis for the last few years. In 2020 SONA, you can see that ECD, the migration of ECD from departments of social development to departments of basic education was a big focus. There was also a focus on other areas of early learning, on skills for a changing world and for the 4th Industrial Revolution. Moving to 2021, we saw a continued focus on ECD, getting the planning and funding right for that. We obviously in 2021 saw a focus on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, which wasn't yet around in 2020 at the start of the year. And we saw continued focus also on improving early learning and overall educational outcomes. as well as a focus on school safety. The left side of this slide repeats the 2021 analysis and compares it to the 2022 SONA. In 2022, there were three main areas: the learning recovery program coming out of the pandemic, school infrastructure again featured quite prominently, and then also the issue of teacher assistance, with the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, which was given great effects in basic education, where hundreds of thousands of general school assistants and education assistants have been employed in the sector. Comparing those three big areas that featured in the 2022 SONA to this year's SONA now, we see again this continued focus on ECD, on expanding support to the ECD sector now that the migration has taken place. We also saw the expansion of vocational training with reference to the 3C model coming through. Again, the SAFE and the CD school infrastructure programs were mentioned, and this time you spent quite a lot of time compared to previous years discussing the matric results. The next section of the presentation just highlights some of the progress that we've been making as a sector against these big themes, these big areas of commitments in this year's SONA, but also recent SONAs. The first area being ECD. As the department has taken over many of the responsibilities for ECD, the focus shifts towards improving the quality of ECD in the country. And there are 5 main strategies around which we hope to improve quality. The first is around implementing the curriculum for children from birth to 5 years. The second is around expanding access to ECD programs across a range of programs, a continuum of programs over the age range. The third area is around training and development to support those who are working in the ECD sector with better career paths, flexible training opportunities. The fourth area is to ensure better coordination across all the range of ECD services in the sector. And the fifth area is around the funding model. And a lot of planning currently is going into ensuring a flexible funding and provisioning framework. Some of the areas of progress that are being made is we're currently investigating within the ECD sector the possibility of a presidential stimulus package. This is still something that is not yet a funded plan, but we are investigating the possibility of doing something in the ECD sector. Then around planning for funding in the sector, one of the things that's recently been conducted in partnership with the World Bank is that we did a public expenditure and institutional review of the ECD sector, and this has pointed to some of the challenges and potential ways forward within the ECD sector and funding, speaking about the role of the equitable share for paying subsidies as well as the conditional grant. It has also highlighted some of the challenges around funding in the sector, such as in certain provinces, lower expenditure on ECD. Part of getting improvement in the sector is having good planning systems in place and good information systems. And in that regard, we've recently signed an MOU with an organization called Elifa Labantwana, to help support us with the long-term development of an ECD management information system. This builds on the work we've done in the last few years to do a census of ECD programs, which has given us a much better base of information now to understand the shape and size of the sector. We are also working with the Vangasali campaign to ensure better registration of ECD programs. Further progress around planning for the ECD sector is that we're developing a quality assurance and support system. And these are being developed based on some of the initiatives in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. Work has also been going on for drafting the second Children's Amendment Bill to review the norms and standards within the sector. And lastly, we are going to be conducting an implementation evaluation of the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy. We've already got a terms of reference ready for a service provider to help evaluate that policy. Turning now towards the area of reading, which has consistently been an important area of early learning highlighted in the SONAs and features prominently in other plans. The first area of progress is around the research and evaluation that has been led by the department in recent years to understand how better to improve reading outcomes in the country as a whole. And here we have various impact evaluations pointing to the value of providing structured support to teachers through lesson plans, through additional reading materials in all the African languages, and through professional support to teachers. We're playing around with experimenting with different types of support to teachers through, for instance, coaching, through getting the departmental heads in the foundation phase to play an internal coaching role and to lead professional learning communities within schools. Another area of work that has been done recently is that we've been developing reading benchmarks in each of the African languages to indicate the level of skills that children need in grades 1, 2, and 3 to be able to ultimately read with meaning by grade 4 or the age of 10. And the particular measures of performance or the benchmarks depend on the language. And cannot just be appropriated from English. And so quite a bit of work has gone into developing these benchmarks in each of the languages specifically. And this now we're now looking at how teachers can use this in the classroom and how as a sector as a whole, we can monitor the progress of the early reading skills so that we can ensure we are on track to also be improving in terms of the outcomes of children reading with meaning. Other areas of programmatic support in reading include the Primary School Reading Improvement Program, which has been implemented for a number of years, and the next year of funding has been secured to train a number of teachers in grades 1 to 3, as well as a large number of subject advisors. Another program that we've been doing is the Reading Champion program, which is using some of the young people that have been employed in our schools recently to help encourage a culture of reading and enjoyment of reading amongst children. Other campaigns are also going on at a societal level to raise awareness about the value of reading, such as the Read to Lead campaign, the National Reading Coalition, the use of virtual book clubs, and the provision of book collection boxes. Turning towards the area of inclusive education, the Directorate for Inclusive Education has focused on implementing inclusive education across the system. This has also included trying to mobilize any out-of-school children, children with disabilities who are not attending school and who should be, as well as improving admission processes at district offices. There's also been support to improve teacher qualifications and skills to ensure that teachers are trained to support with the identification and screening and support of children with special needs. We've collaborated with various organizations, including the British Council, DHET, and other particular higher education institutions, and trained a number of teachers on areas like South African Sign Language, autism, and Braille. And we're implementing the CS policy to ensure that we identify and address any learning barriers in children. There are some challenges that have been noted in this area around, for instance, spaces in special schools, and also enough support staff at the district level. The three-stream model has featured prominently, including in this latest SONA, and some of the areas of progress that we can note are firstly around increased enrollments in technical subjects in the last 3 years. We've provided statistics there for 6 technical subjects, and in each of those cases we see quite significant increases in enrollments in those subjects. We've also developed a number of partnerships within the sector to support us with rolling out the 3 streams model, such as with the Sasol Foundation and with DHET Skill Centers, as well as the National Association of Schools of Technology. Focusing in particular now on the GET band, there's been work around developing and finalizing the curriculum and assessment policy statements for 37 GET subjects. We're also piloting 13 vocational subjects across 105 public ordinary schools in grades 8 and 9. There are 74 schools of skill currently offering occupational subjects in the GET band. A further 268 public ordinary schools are piloting the general education certificate. And this is another area of work that is going on, the development of the general education certificate, or GEC. And currently, as mentioned, a lot of schools are piloting this. There's also been work in developing learning and teacher support material to support vocational and occupational education, and a large number of books have already been completed. And lastly, 46 provincial coordinators have been trained on the occupational and vocational curriculum. Challenges in the rollout of the 3-stream model to include subject advisors who are trained to support the new subjects, as well as funding for teacher training on all of these new subjects. Turning towards skills for a changing world, and focusing on coding and robotics, we have finalized the curriculum statements for this, and we've been doing a pilot of the implementation of coding and robotics across grades R to 3 and 7. There's been ongoing review and revision already of the drafts of the curriculum statements. We've provided LTSM, including coding and robotics devices and kits. Lesson plans have been made available. Teacher training has happened in piloting schools. There have been coding clubs that have been formed, and at a provincial level, project management teams have been established. Some of the challenges here, again, include subject specialists at the district level or provincial level. As well, yeah, through the SCD program, about 15,000 toilets have been built across more than 1,000 schools, and 373 schools were provided with electrical connections. Under the SAFE program, this initially targeted 3,395 schools, and through this program, about 50,000 appropriate toilets were constructed over 2,000 schools, and sanitation projects at the remaining 1,007 schools are scheduled to be completed in the next financial year. There are some challenges still around school infrastructure, including around the reliability of water sources, but also building space and overcrowding of schools is becoming a challenge, especially in certain areas. Turning lastly, I think, to social cohesion. Various programs in the sector provide a lot of care and support to children. The school nutrition program is perhaps chief amongst those, and for many years now, we've been providing more than 9 million children with a daily meal. The pandemic, I think, showed just how important this program is. When schools had to be closed, we did observe an increase in child hunger. So this program clearly has huge benefits to children. And currently, we are considering menus for ECD programs as well. A gender responsive pedagogy toolkit for early childhood education has also been developed. There's the National School Safety Framework, through which we monitor school safety. And there's lastly to mention the policy on the prevention and management of learner pregnancy in schools. And this has also been disseminated now across all provinces. So that is the end of the presentation. The recommendation is for the committee to note this analysis and to discuss the implications for the sector. Thank you very much, DG and Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Deputy Minister, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This is our presentation.
Yep. Hey, thank you very much, DM, DG, and Dr. Taylor, for the presentation. Let me now allow members to that have an input to input. Can I note hands? Arsiami. Are we fine, members? I see the hand of Honorable Van der Walt. Oh, over to you, Honorable Van der Walt.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all colleagues, including our department's officials. Chair, I made a lot of notes when studying the presentations, and without going into the detail of every single thing, because I mean, we are quite worried about the school nutrition program, especially in the economic situation that we are in. There's been a lot of challenges, and we know that more and more children will be dependent on this. But indeed, the economic situation is going to impact on what the department can provide, especially in our poorer provinces, and what provision is actually made to accommodate the growing need. Because I know plans are drawn up quite a bit in advance before they are, part of an APP or a budget, etc. And then the issue about ECDs, I really would like to know exactly, because there is confusion on exactly after the debate the other day with the matric results, exactly what is the number of learners that have been accommodated formally in ECD since it's been taken over, and how many of our children are still outside of the formal ECD sector, and how and what funds and where will the funds come from to cater for all, because we need to get all the children in this age category into the formal ECD sector. But however, I also looked at the infrastructure, and we know that as much as ASIDI and other programs progressed, we also had vandalism. We have had storm damages, which sets us back, and maybe a bit more detailed on where we were and where we are now since this term started, because there's definitely been setbacks as well. My biggest concern, which I would like to put on the table, Chair, is the mere fact that we have this presentations, and we get very excited and happy on many of the things that are planned. But I get the feeling that not in all 9 provinces, there is the same planning with the same goals or the achievement of set goals. And what indeed can the minister or the DG or the deputy minister do to make sure that all 9 provinces, especially our poorer provinces who are struggling, because there is definitely not the same urge or urgency to achieve all of this. To many of them, this is just part of their job. They have to have plans, they have to submit it, they have to come to MINMEC meetings or whatever. And if they make it, great. If they don't, there's a list of excuses and challenges are listed on why we didn't achieve. And I think the time is starting to run out, because especially in our foundation stages, from ECD to the full foundation stage, so we cannot get relaxed. More than ever, we cannot. As you know, we don't believe the real pass rate is is what was announced. And I think this brings the challenge just very close to our hearts, that every single province and every single person that is appointed in education departments must be on the same level as what is presented to us in this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Itzia, thank you, Van Wel.
Thank you, Chair. My audible network and Rapama.
Siyakuva, Baba.
Thank you, Chair. Let's welcome, good morning to yourself, Chairperson. Good morning to honorable members. Good morning to the DG and the team from the department. Good morning, Minister and Deputy Minister of the Department of Basic Education. Chair, let's welcome them. The presentation from the department. And I think at some point we must make honest observations. I think coming from what the department has presented, the department has done well in terms of increasing the number of passes, increasing the quality of those passes as it was presented here, but also by the DG in the technical presentation before the announcement of the matric results. Those numbers, you know, if people want to argue about the real pass rate and non-real pass rate, at least let them take us through on facts. Let them say, this is what we don't agree with because this is what we have. Instead of just saying, no, we don't agree with the technical report that was presented by the DG and also the report presented by the minister when the results were announced. I think let's give credit where it's due. I want to personally congratulate the department on not giving up on those who were progressed learners in grade, probably grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. Because according to the presentation now, including progressed learners, they did extremely well in matric examinations and they actually passed. And I want to congratulate and thank the department for not giving up on those learners who were progressed. Chair, we come from, we are fresh from oversight in KwaZulu-Natal. We saw that some of the recommendations, especially in what is that one region, Herigwala region or Herigwala district in KwaZulu-Natal, some of the recommendations that we had made as a portfolio committee were not followed by the education department in the province. We're not sure how many out of provinces that we went to the Northwest, Free State, and Mpumalanga, and all of that, how many of our recommendations were followed. Now, I want to suggest to the department that they must develop a monitoring mechanism to monitor provinces if provinces are following up on their recommendation as the department, but also on recommendations that we have made ourselves. And I want to go to a few questions. We know that our economy has been stagnant for a long time or with slow growth. Now I want to ask on the recommendations or on the SONA, on the issues that were covered in SONA, the focus areas, how realistic is the department optimistic? Are these SONA focus areas given how slow our economy has been growing? and are they cost effective? What will need to be done in terms of asking for more money in order for us to achieve the SONA focus areas? And then on the introduction of ICT, the school in rural areas, how are they affected or how are they benefiting? And I know that it might be possible, but I'm going to ask them anyway. It might be possible for the rollout to happen at the same time, given the cost issues and the growth of the economy. Do we have any schools that are excluded on ICT? If yes, how many are included in the country, and can they give us a breakdown per province? And then we also saw, Chair, that in districts where water is a challenge, we have a lot of schools who still use pit toilets. We'd like the department to give us the numbers, schools per province who are still challenged by this, and what is it that we're trying to do, what the department is trying to do to help the situation or to avert this challenge. And then there's this thing, man, of service providers generally who like overpricing when they're dealing with government. A case in point here is these ones who are doing service, but again, student accommodation providers in the higher education space. They're overpriced. They want to overprice government every second they get. Now I want to ask the Department of Basic Education, how prevalent is this when it comes to building of schools, renovation of schools, and all of that in the Department of Basic Education? And are these prices that they are being charged in building of schools compatible with the markets? So, for an example, maybe they charge rent per square kilometer of building. Have they compared that with, in the same area, a rent per square kilometer when, let's say, they are building a house or something of an individual? Are this have they tried to do to gather this data, and if these prices are compatible? If not, what is it that the department will do to try and avert this criminal behavior from service providers? And if also lastly, maybe how are prices regulated on the building of our schools, and who regulates them? Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning.
Thank you, Honorable Itzi. Honorable Advance. Honorable Advance. What is going on now? Okay. I don't know, maybe she doesn't have network.
And Vakali.
Oh, you can talk to
Am I
her.
audible now? The right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Chair. Let me also appreciate and welcome the presentation, and also congratulate the department for moving a step forward in achieving the 2030 NDP goals. Chair, let me also maybe have some few questions of clarity to the Deputy Minister and the team. As I've been listening to the presentation attentively, and I've noted some few questions that I would also need maybe some emphasis, clarity on. Firstly, on the ECD migration, if maybe if it's not today, but if we can maybe get a presentation of a comprehensive report on the ECD migration ever since it happened on the 1st of March or 1st of April last year or 2022. As we hear there are a lot of concerns that have been raised and confusions that are also not clear whether what is happening with the ECD migration, and whether there are also ECDs that have not been registered. All that information, if maybe we can get it, because it's my belief that once we get the early childhood development in the right place, then it will go into resolve many challenges. Like, for instance, the issue of 10-year-olds that are not being able to read for meaning. I think it's one of the challenges and concerns that were highlighted by many speakers in the SONA debates. So if maybe we can also get the plans, as we know, there were other provinces and districts that were piloted to undertake these programs and projects of 10-year-olds reading for meaning. So if maybe we can also be giving an update, what are other plans to make sure that it happens in all the provinces, and also if there are any programs the department must share with us. I think Honorable Tia spoke about the ICT support, more especially to rural schools in rural areas. If maybe we can also get a clarity on the update on whether there is some plans to make sure that all schools and learners are able also to get such a support. The issue of infrastructure, I think it will be an ongoing concern, as there are people who would migrate to new places or move to new places where they would settle, and schools will also be needed to be built for such communities. But also maybe if we can get the update on the infrastructure on the issue of eradication of pit toilets, more especially in provinces like Limpopo, Eastern Cape and KZN, where we know that there are many rural areas that need such a program, toilets to be eradicated. One fundamental improvement that I think has assisted the department or even the sector itself to more especially on the issue of learners that have been lost in the system is now that we see there's a lot of second chance matric program and learners that are attending in numbers. Is there any plans and support in place to make sure that many of those that have not done their matric are brought back to the system and also be able to be given a chance to complete their matric. Those are my few questions, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Principal.
My chair and everybody on this all important platform. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. Let us start right away by welcoming and appreciating this, what I normally call, it is just not a call because of being a call, but the department every time when we invite them to brief us, first and foremost, I can confirm that they take their time and they prepare. And we get what we, even more than we bargain for, we shall have bargained for. We want to appreciate and welcome this well-oiled report, presentation. I've got 1, 2, 3 points to raise here, Chairperson. First and foremost, the fact, as per the presentation, that we are able to witness an improvement from what in the past used to be called dysfunctional schools within our dysfunctional and very rural communities. This improvement should actually be taken to the bank, because in itself, you see, it has been an outcry of the department and almost all stakeholders that we want to see our rural schools, dysfunctional schools, competing with those affluent schools for purposes of trying to strike a balance. You see, the reason why sometimes in the past people were talking about Bantu education and what have you is simply because of the imbalance that we have been going through for quite some ages. So the improvements in performance from the class of 2022 should, to us, be sending a message that it is possible. It is possible to strike a balance. It is possible to close the gap. So we want to commend the department, but at the same time pleading with the department, you see, especially with regard to the infrastructure, to continue working very hard, that we close the gap, thereby making it a point that our former disadvantaged and dysfunctional areas, the west rural areas, they are being improved resources-wise. They improve so that they can be able to close the gap at our disposal. The second point, you see, Mama Gladys, Honorable Aduns, has just, and she was just talking about the whole issue of the ECD. You see, Chair, it is my plea that definitely, of course, I support Honorable Aduans that we need a special session on the ECD, because we do not want the president and or the presidents year in and year out during the State of the Nation address talking about the function shift, which practicality remains static. We need to get the progress report. How far has the department moved ever since we talked about the function shift of the ECD into the main streamline of our education? We need to get the budgeted time constraints that is so far within this province we have got this number of ECD centers, and our aim is by the end of this academic year, the following shall have moved, so that it is not only going to be the rhetoric of talking about the function shift without the whole situation being pragmatized. Hence, I'm going to plead that the department comes very clean in as far as this. You see, we make it our project. We do not want to fall into a snare like the NHI in the Department of Health, where every year the president keeps on talking about the NHI is up and coming. The NHI is up and coming, but in reality, there is no single movement. Otherwise, I would love to plead with the department that we have got a program, the program which will be manageable, so that we put into practice the whole concept of ECD. Maybe as I talk to the improvement of the results, I should also say we must take into consideration that the whole element, in as far as we concentrate on the human resource, we also concentrate on the infrastructure to make it a point that there is no such gaps as they existed in the past. But we commended the department, we can see the movement, but we need more and more effort into it so that indeed this gap is fully closed. Chairperson, I must conclude by saying there will be no education of our child. The future of our education starts and commences with the management of the ECD. Thank you, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Principal. Noted. Honorable noted.
Is covered.
I think it is covered. Can you
I'm not covered, Chair.
talk?
Why are you keeping quiet?
Relax, Principal. Can I just take this? Cool. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation to the department. I just have quite a few questions because some of these things I did raise even at SONA in the debate, but this is the correct forum to raise some of them with the department. And it's quite interesting looking at some of the strategic framework goals, the targets, the intention of some of these programs. And I kept on hearing the presenter saying, you know, we've made progress since 2002, made progress, this and that. I don't think anybody would deny that there's some level of progress that has been made. But there are also issues that are glaring at us in the face, and we need to be frank and honest about them so that we don't beat around the bush and dilly-dally and trying to justify some of the poor performance in some areas, but rather saying what are the mitigating strategies to solve some of them. So I just want to start with the one that's obviously clearing the face, that we've got, the reading panel's report saying that 8 out of 10 grade 4 children can't read for meaning. And that obviously are the 10-year-olds that are referred to the strategic framework of the department, the strategic goals that have been put there. And there's an indication that there are budget constraints in implementing some of these programs, which I don't think is an acceptable excuse, to be quite honest, because if learners can't read, they're doomed before they even begin. You can build all the infrastructure you want, you can train all the teachers you want, you can throw all the resources and all the money that you want. But if learners can't read and comprehension of the basic order, all of those things that you would have thrown money at become completely useless. So my question then becomes, to solve part of the major problem that we have of children that can't read for meaning in any language, attending 89% of schools without libraries, Because you can have reading champions, but if you don't have facilities for them to champion that reading, then it's pointless having those reading champions. So what are the mitigating strategies the department has to put in place for them, one, to have a funded budget for reading for meaning, program that will be aligned to either building libraries or collaborating with communities or other stakeholders in the sector to be able to provide a facility for that reading for meaning. And this must also be reflected in the APPs and the budget that's going to come up. So do we have a plan? Do you have in place? There is a suggestion that was made to say, how do we turn some of the EAs to become reading champions in this regard? And I've seen a presentation saying that some of them have been used as reading champions, but the reality is that almost 90% of the schools don't have facilities for learners to read for meaning, let alone material. I mean, I went to Loding Primary School in Mpumalanga, and the teachers were saying that, parents want these children to study in isiNdebele, but there's not even one book of isiNdebele in our own library, the little library that we've created ourselves in the school. So really, this thing of, saying, yeah, there's more improvement in this and these results. I mean, there used to be 10% 5 million years ago, and therefore, we've made the improvement. Sure, fine, let's recognize that. But the reality is that we're not where we need to be, because the net result of all of that is that you then find that along the way, you lose a large number of learners, or their outcomes in terms of quality of their depth and understanding of work actually just deteriorates to a point whereby some of them even decide, you know what, I can't cope with this amount of work because I can't comprehend what is being said. Let me rather leave the schooling system, or let me rather accept the fact that I'm going to have poor quality outcomes and I'm going to end up sitting at home joining a lot of people that don't. And that's the reality. It's not a made up some sort of perception. Go to Kolobeni, go to Matatiel, go to different places in Tsolo, where you see these realities. These are people's lives. The statistics that you say it's 10% that's improved to 41%, those are people. Those are real life young people. So if we come and sometimes trying to polish and pretend as if, yeah, you know what, nothing is as bad as it seems, whereas the actual problem is real, then we're going to have a problem. So that's the first thing around reading for meaning. And some of the proposals that I would like to put forward on this particular issue is for the department to look at, as part of the annual targets, how do they mitigate the challenge of 89% of schools that don't have libraries? Secondly, how do we get a budget, or what budget can be put in place to particularly focus on a strategy around improving reading for meaning, particularly for children in early childhood development, the foundation phase, and the 10-year-olds that we indicate that are in foundation phase that need to read for meaning by grade 10. And thirdly, is there a diverse method that can be done where those learners can be able to read for meaning in their own language? Some people were up in raw when I was giving them a practical thing that is being done in the Western Cape. And some parents from Khayelitsha, Delft, Mitchell's Plain, Bonneville sent me videos of their children being taught how to read, extra 2 hours of reading during the week. And they were saying, you're right, my child has got a better comprehension and reading now because this is the intervention that has been put in place. And some people think it's a political tool that is being used. It's a fact, it's a reality that's being done because there's a challenge for people to read for meaning, for them to comprehend what they're studying. So the department needs to investigate some of those mechanisms that are being put in place, not just also in other provinces, but just generally as international best practice. Even in the countries that the minister mentioned in SONA, of Seychelles and other countries that are ahead of us, what mechanisms do they put in place to make sure that the learners actually comprehend and read for meaning, rather than making excuses as to, we've improved from 10% to 41%, which is actually still not enough. So that's the first point around that. Secondly, there was a mention about quality passing and improving of results and, this gloating and all of that. I'm still sitting with hundreds of emails, not just from me, but from my colleagues. So I've got a bachelor's pass, but I can't access this university because they're saying my problem is maths, or I passed this thing by 30%, or I didn't meet the APS points and those requirements. And I can tell you, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of learners that are going through that right now. And we sit here and we want to applaud that, oh, yeah, we've made this massive, percentage of a pass. All good and well. There's an improvement that has been put in place. There are strategies that are put in place that have improved the learning of children and ultimately the outcomes. But it's not at the quality level that we need it to be. Now, do we sit here and just applaud and not be critical about what is important for learners to be able to achieve as outcomes? And then, we are going to be called as, oh, well, you don't understand that we've been coming from this far and therefore we're this far. The reality is that these are people's lives. It's not some statistic that we can gloat about. It's the reality of children's lives that we need to be honest about. Now, when it comes to the measurement of quality passing, right, we've got 32% of learners that have passed with a bachelor's pass. And I want the department to be able to present or send me information as to with that 32% of learners that passed with a bachelor's pass based on the criteria that was set about that you can get 4 subjects and 50%, and this and 40% in one subject and 30% for you to get a bachelor's pass. How many of them actually will qualify and enter a university? And I can guarantee you it's almost less than half of that number that will be able to access a university, or in fact, institution of higher learning to further their studies. Because TVET colleges may not offer NQF level qualifications at the same level of universities. And these are frank things that we don't talk about because we want to sweep them under the carpet and pretend as if these are not realities that do exist. But in fact, those are the realities that exist. So secondly, in link to this, can the department do an investigation or a research, as we like to call it, as to, is there a need to force children to pass at least one subject by 30% for them to get a better bachelor's pass? Or should we be saying that, the same criteria that they use and say the least subject you can pass with is 40% in line with whatever the strategic goals are of education, as well as further education and training, because that's what bachelor passes are mainly targeted for you to be able to study further, right? And secondly, in developing this criteria, at least for your mathematics and for your languages, you are not allowed to get less than 40%, whatever the criteria may be. But to just do research as to what do other countries do when it comes to a bachelor's pass for you to access a university? What is the criteria? Is it aligned with what we have to say a child has got a bachelor's pass, but they don't access the university? Are we not creating some false sense of hope that they are going to be able to further their studies when in fact, they are not going to be able to do that? The second thing linked to this thing of bachelor's passes, I've raised this in the previous meeting. I still don't understand what is this fuss about us writing examinations. What exactly are we trying to test when we're saying children must write an NSC exam? Because it's a cramming festival. Those that have the resources to cram the best will get the best outcomes. Should we not be moving to a continuous assessment method so that we measure the professional, personal, and knowledge development of that child on a continuous basis, so that if the academic pathway is not the one for them, but a vocational, occupational, or technical pathway is the best stream for them, we're able to channel them into those streams, rather than letting a child parked in the system until matric for them to realize that actually this was not my stream to begin with, because the aim for me was to be test how much can I cram, and I crammed enough throughout the years, but I can't cram enough for my matric outcome. So these are some of the conversations that we need to have, so that when we talk about annual targets, or we talk about annual performance plans, when we talk about budgets, we talk about things that will impact the lives of those faces that you put as percentage realistically, not out of some fictitious belief that they're doing well, when in fact we know for fact that those learners end up in our unemployment ranks. They end up living poverty. And we see them on a day-to-day basis. We get contacted by them on a day-to-day basis. As representatives of the people, we need to be honest about the outcomes of some of these challenges as announced at SONA. So these are some of the two areas that I've got profound interest in, Chair, that I get a response, and I will do a follow-up question if I don't get satisfactory answers on these things, because it likes to be given as, by the way, answers and as if this thing is being politicized, when in fact it's not. These are realities of young people. These are realities of learners. And we need to be able to be honest about how do we solve their challenges. rather than taking these things emotionally. The third and last one, Chair, is on the, before I go there, is on the Pearls. I'm looking at the Pearls and Tim's results previously, and it's quite interesting. Some of these comments, how we use statistics to kind of favor our own view, where rather than painting them to be what they actually are. But I'm very keen to see what the Pearls outcomes will bring this time around, even though we know learners were affected by COVID. But the last thing I want to ask is in relation to the infrastructure methods. There's a mention of SAFE and ACD, and the presentation was done. The president in the previous SONA spoke about a new special purpose vehicle. I asked these questions before. The DG said, no, we engaged public works on this thing. We engaged the announcement by the presidency. There's still nothing on paper that says what this new special purpose vehicle will look like and how it will be funded and all of that. Again, this year, we're told about infrastructure that needs to be built and improved, but also there's still nothing that has been given to us as to what is a special purpose vehicle looking like that we're talking about. Where's the funding going to come from? Is it still safe in a CD? Is it still safe in a CD as a vehicle that is being used? Is it just going to be funded over? What exactly is being done there? And also, I made an example of a school in Stekstrom that was built for 20 million with smart boards. In fact, it was renovated for about 20 million from the ground up. It's got smart boards, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got all of that stuff. Some of our schools, there's a school in Engo, for example, it was built for about 52 million, in my own village, right? It's got none of those things, none of those features. The size of the school is the same. The number of classrooms, in fact, are less than the school in Stekstrom. So what method and mechanisms do we use for these implementing agents for them to cost our schools at such an exorbitant, expensive price? Whereas there are schools that are built for less than half that amount, that have got more to offer than our own schools. These are honest conversations we don't have. And maybe if I'm not a civil engineer, I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder for that matter, but I can guarantee you I can see something that is being exploited compared to something that's not being exploited. And I feel like some of these programs that we have that are hindering us from eradicating pit toilet, dilapidated mud and asbestos schools that are there is because some of these implementing agents that we have, that we give money to, build our schools for 3 times the money that we're supposed to build for. Now, if you're not honest about these conversations and you want to, sweep them under the carpet, do them at your own peril. But the statistics that you use to try and say we've improved this and that, there's better outcomes there, we've built the school, then just know that it affects real lives and real people's lives. And the effect of poor decision-making and poor calls and not being honest about the state of our education will ultimately affect these children when they are young adults sitting at home not having a job. And you can all paint a picture of, oh, well, the NSC is not necessarily for you to go and to get to a university or go for, you must just be a good citizen. How are you going to be a good citizen when you're hungry in your stomach, when you have no job, when you can fall into a life of crime? Obviously, you're going to contribute to the bad habits our country has. So are we fine with that, that we're currently producing? Are we fine with the systems that we're using for infrastructure and not being able to hold people accountable for the statements that they make? Even today, I don't even know what that special purpose vehicle looks like. So these are some of the points that I wanted to raise, Chairperson. And lastly, suggest to the department, the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative, it's giving EAs to the department. It's time that those EAs are used to even better effect. In fact, those EAs should be permanently employed to alleviate the admin pressure on teachers so that they increase the 12% less teaching time that they have, as well as contribute to being reading champions in facilities that offer that type of reading with a budget that is going to assist those children to improve their reading. Those are some of the points that I want to raise, Honorable Lucia, because I was not covered. Thank you so much, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Notata. You can lower your hand. Thank you very much. Look, from my side, I think one wants to concur with the DM when she has said that the department is doing well. Actually, the department really has stabilized. And of course, there would be challenges, because well doesn't mean that you are not going to face challenges. Well means that you are stabilized, and I think that's what we need to say with the Department of Basic Education, with all the challenges that are there. But there is a serious stability, whether it's because of whatever, whether it's because of having leadership being consistent, or whether it's because of the committed officials that are there. The reality is that there is stability in the Department of Basic Education. Now, from my side, few things that I would want to raise. You know, the issue of the school nutrition program that is being rolled out by the department, we don't really speak. I think we don't speak enough of its successes as the big program that is run by the department to our children. At personal level, I'm from the Northern Cape, which is a fairly poor province, and one came to realize and appreciate the fact that should it had not been because of this program, it could have been worse for our learners. Just few kilometers from Kimberley, there is a rural school in Koopmansfontein. It's an area that is Koopmansfontein. It's a very nice school in a rural area. And I was speaking with one of the professors who apparently they've made some research in that school, and specifically on the school nutrition program. And they have realized that most of the children there are suffering from iron. You know, are things that we take light, we don't think that they are there. And when they have tried to go deeper into what is the reason for this, is that children, they don't get iron at home. They don't get food that has got iron at home. And the only meal which is prepared nicely that they get is the meal that they get from the school. Now, the only meat that they eat at school is the insides of chicken, like your chicken hearts, your gizzards, and that's the only meat they get from school. And that type of meal cannot effectively give someone an iron. But the story behind this is that, you know, some of us realize and understand that there are things that the department does which even the parents of those learners would not do. And one of the questions that we consistently ask, even when we are on oversight, is what time are these learners eating? And effectively, in most provinces, the department has managed to make sure that at least around 10 o'clock, the learners are getting food, which brings some form of dignity to those learners, which is a different case from me and you and our children. So one wants to say that there is the school nutrition program. It's a big program run by the department, but it is an effective and it is an assisting program for kids really that has got nothing, but who wants to be at school, and the type of dignity that it brings to those children, because they do not get any type of food which is prepared, and of course to them with love. Because as you know, one of the challenges also that we have in the Northern Cape is that many households, people are drinking, so they don't have really time to look into the well-being of these children. The second issue that I want to raise, and which is my concern to the department, is the schools which are referred to as maths and science schools. I think the department must also be cautioned that, when we build a school with an intention of being a maths and science school, or rather when we convert a school with an intention of being a maths and science school, we must at least be sure of the resources that are behind that intention. Many of the schools, and I think it was also the case with the KZN in some of the districts that you've got a maths and science school, and in that school you've got laboratories, but those laboratories are not resourced. And it changes then the phrase of calling that particular school a school of maths and science, for one reason or the other, which we don't know. And I think we must appreciate such schools, because I think it's one of the schools that we went to even now in KZN, where those learners are not resourced, and the only way a teacher can carry them through an experiment is to use an iPad, and they can only look through the iPad how the experiment is being done, but they can't do it themselves because the school is not resourced. But through that, those children are doing very well, and they have passed. And I think it's one of the rural schools where we were. Then the last thing that I want to talk on is the issue of pit latrines, which I think there are members who spoke on it. My view is that at some point we need to put a target which says so and so province at this time must have eradicated pit latrines, toilets in all our schools. Free State has done it. Free State does not have any pit latrine schools in all their districts. How they have done it, probably it's what they would have to need to share with other provinces. But if Free State can do it, it means that it can be done by other provinces as well. So I think it's one of the targets that the department must put itself on, to eradicate pit latrines altogether, and to do that with speed. COVID has shown us that when we want to do things with speed, we can do things with speed. I think the issue of pit latrines really now, it's long overdue. Even in rural schools, we have seen those schools. We have been there. We have seen them. They might look nice because of probably how they are done. And those learners have accepted that such schools must be in that form. But we know that really they are not healthy. They are not good. We need to find a way of quickly eradicating them. And then I'm giving over to you then, DM, to lead the responses. Thank you very much.
Chairperson, thank you very much. To me, this is the most effective meeting that I have ever attended. And as a department, we are not taking anything personal as a department, because we believe in the thinking capacity of the portfolio committee members, especially Honorable Notata. As he was speaking, I asked myself, where did he attend school? Maybe if I may get that answer, because Honorable Notata is so articulate and is so intelligent and he's so good. But I want to understand the system that produced Honorable Notata. Which system is that? Chair, I don't know whether I'm out of order, but I would have just loved to get that system, or maybe he didn't get his education in South Africa. Yeah, is that Honorable Notata?
Can I answer the Deputy Minister, Chair?
Yes,
I can
please,
answer
I would
you,
appreciate.
Deputy Minister.
You can answer her.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
You see, the fortunate and unfortunate part is that I attended in junior senior secondary school. And then I went to Hlanganani Prep, which was owned by two lovely white people that came from out of the country to help poor communities in the location at Hlanganani to get an education.
Okay.
I was fortunate from there to go to Kersney College to go and access those facilities that today have broadened my horizon. And I matriculated at Hudson Park High School. The reason I'm giving this background, DM, I want to end that I'm very, very passionate about those that are at NU that never got the opportunities that I got at Kersney to be able to broaden my horizon. And sometimes you may think that I'm hard because, I have gone through a different system. I didn't go through a different system. I was just fortunate to get a scholarship to an independent system that may have broadened my horizon to see things from a different perspective, travel, things that other people would not get an opportunity for. If Baba saying, where you do science, you don't have facilities to do science. You don't have. The first time I put together light bulb was at Kersney College. I didn't know you put together light bulb when you're doing science. So the point I'm trying to make is that the system in its entirety has pockets of excellence. There are pockets of excellence. There are improvements, but a large majority leaves behind. Many of my peers that I went to grade 1 with Engu are nowhere. I can tell you, I can take you to Elalinyam now today. In every house that has meat. Now, the question I ask myself is that the future that I would like to have of my peers, where I had the opportunity to get out and get the, because I was exposed maybe to a scholarship. So the system in its entirety is not entirely bad, and never take it in that spirit. But to say that there are those pockets of excellence that must be preserved and protected and gain access to, but we must improve the vast majority of it to be those pockets of excellence rather than having pockets of excellence, but have the whole basket be of excellence.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Notata. No, I'm happy that the system in the country also contributed to what you are and who you are today. And South Africa will benefit from you. And thank you very much. Chair, the questions and all the issues raised here, I think, we have sufficient time to respond, starting from Honorable van der Waals, who asked questions about National School Nutrition, ECD, ACD, and general maintenance of schools, vandalism and storm damage, and which Honorable Zia also added on ICT, SAFE, and the quantity. What is that? Not quantity, the cost per classroom and cost for whatever. And follow up on the recommendations made during oversight. I'm reading this summary so that the teacher will get exactly the issues that were raised, which Honorable Adons also added on the early childhood development, ICT, infrastructure, and the second chance. Honorable Morazela added also on the ECD with all the issues raised by Honorable Nodada. He said he has 3, but to me, I've written 6. He asked about reading, and he gave proposals, which when I tried to write the proposal so that we benefit as a department, but they turned into questions as to what is the department going to do. I was so happy when he said he has proposals to make, but they all turned into questions. Would appreciate if Honorable Nodada can turn those questions into real proposals so that we are able to incorporate that on the reading then, and the quality of passes, the 30%, and raised issues of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of learners whose passes cannot take them to universities, which raised the question to me, of course, that how many universities do we have in the country? Are they empty today as we speak? Because most learners who obtained level 7 in mathematics and physical science are roaming the streets because our capacity in the country is not enough to can take all the learners that have been passed by this department. That's why there were contradictions even in the SOPA debates. People saying we producing in poor quality education, but at the same time, they say thousands and thousands of graduates. You ask yourself, where do these graduates come from who are lingering the streets? But they were produced by basic education, fed to the higher education. And now higher education, universities are full. People are coming, our learners are coming to us for intervention. We try because really we don't understand how a level 7 mathematics cannot be taken by a university to do BSc or engineering, and find that they raise the standard so that it becomes so difficult for our learners to be absorbed by the universities, because we only have 20 or 21 universities in the country. And the more we increase the number of passes, if more than 500,000 learners passed and our universities can only take 200,000 per year for students, it's a challenge. Obviously, 300,000 will linger around. It's a problem of the country that we must come together, all of us, and help South Africa to grow better. So I'm not blaming our higher education, but I'm saying it's our responsibility, all of us, to say we divert them to skills and this and that, because the basic education is doing its part, but the training industry does not have sufficient capacity to can train. And this does not only involve public sector, it also involves private sector. We sit together to plan for the skills that are needed by the country. And when we produce, we prepare those skills as basic education. Higher education trains, they come back. We have engineers that are not absorbed, not only by public sector, by private sector itself, with whom we set to come up with a human resource development strategy for the country. And they are also represented in the council itself. But when coming to the absorption, now they leave it to government alone. So I just felt that let me just comment on this. Let me give DG and the team, because we have the entire team here who's ready to respond to each and every issue, except the issues where we have to give numbers, how many schools, Honorable, let's say, how many schools have ICT connectivity. That information we do have, but it may not be in our fingers right now, but the Tabane is here. Maybe he has those figures, but which I doubt that, because when he came here, we were ready for all the SONA issues that were raised by President. But DG, let me give to you and the team to allocate them per their responsibility to respond per item. Thank you. Over to you, DG.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Chair, and honorable members. DM, you have noted 10 issues raised by Honorable Nodada. I've noted 16, 1-6. He made reference to 3 things. I think they are broken down to 16. So we're going to do our best to respond to all of them. Mr. Tabani has got the numbers, and I'll indicate which numbers he must give. He should have those numbers. Our view is that if we come to these meetings, we bring our laptops, our iPads, and in instances where we don't, which would be very few instances, we will then go back, Deputy Minister, and get the information that we have not provided. In my usual style, I want to start with the chair, because the chair was the last one to ask questions. Maths and science schools must be fully resourced to reflect the imperative of such schools. I fully agree with the chair, but I want to respectively also indicate that we also have science kits that are provided, not necessarily your 4 walls of labs, because of issues of vandalism and so on. So science kits, you can take them and lock them in, or even take them to a place of safety. But experiments are also done virtually. As the chair has indicated, experiments done through iPads, where learners do not smell the chemicals and so on, but is done virtually. That's the latest method that is used. And I'm not surprised that the chair is saying using that method seems to be working for schools. So schools do use that. Mr. Tabani will attest to it as well. Thank you, Chair, for appreciating the value of NSNP. I have shared with the committee before that when I was in the Northwest as the head of the department, we commissioned a study on the provision of NSNP. At that time, NSNP was not provided every day, it was provided on certain days. We wanted to check the reason for learners coming at school. And the findings were overwhelming to suggest that learners coincidentally happen to come and learn, but in the main, because of hunger and poverty, they go to school to eat for survival, and they were taking some of the food that they were eating for their siblings and other people back home. That's the value of NSNP. Dr. Stephen Taylor indicated that during COVID, starvation and hunger increased. The studies indicated that, and they attested to the value of NSNP. That's why we're taken to court, and we had to provide feeding, although schooling was not running during that time. So your observations, Chair, are spot on. Even people who said some learners might be suffering from iron deficiency, either syndromes or diseases, which are attributable to the diet that learners are exposed to in their homes, which does not afford them these important nutrients, or things that are very important for a balanced diet and their development as children. Thank you, Chair, for acknowledging that the system has stabilized. It has not only stabilized, but it has demonstrated resilience. I've said this before, and sometimes maybe we speak past each other. There are many challenges in the system. They are there and they'll be there for quite some time. And as we celebrate the progress that we are making, we must be woefully aware of the challenges that still lie ahead. The Minister and Deputy Minister are the first to remind us all the time that there is no room for celebration and basking in the sun forever. There's a lot to be done. The NDP is very clear on what we have to achieve. And we still have not even achieved half of that, of what the NDP expects us to do. We are the first one to acknowledge that. We will not bask in the sun of celebration forever and say we have achieved this without acknowledging our weaknesses. But as somebody said, we tell no lies, we claim no easy victories, but we do acknowledge the progress that we are making. I want to go to Honorable Muratsetla. Thank you also for appreciating the progress that you are making. It gives at least courage, especially to the foot soldiers who are in the meeting, who are close to the furnace of fire. One can say we are paid for the work that we do, yes, but also the acknowledgement and appreciation gives you more strength, courage to even do better and perform beyond your wildest imagination. That's how you motivate the public service that has a task of carrying the nation to what the National Development Plan says we must achieve. ECD function shift, we will come back, Honorable Muratsetla. Actually, we are ready. You call us tomorrow, we'll be before you. There is what we have commissioned called the ECD Census Index. According to Stats SA, there are 5.3 million learners of 0 to 5 year old who are supposed to be attending ECD programs. There are 1.2 learners who are receiving ECD programs which are provided by government, and 1.6 who come from wealthy families. We've also done a study that is referred to Thrive by 5. In other words, that study says only 35% of learners thrive by 5 who are of early childhood development program age, which means 65% of learners do not have the required cognitive development and physical development interjected because I'm using my there are only 35% of learners, 35% who thrive by 5. In other words, they have the cognitive and physical development required for them to engage with learning meaningfully. 65 learners do not thrive by 5. Remember, we took ECD lock, stock, and barrel. We had to carry out the studies to tell us how many learners are out there and how many are in the system, how many come from vulnerable families, how many come from wealthy families. We have that statistic or data. I do support Honorable Muratsetla and Honorable Aduns that call us in, will come and share plans with you on what we have planned to do regarding ECD. Yes, Honorable Muratsetla, maybe you don't know as a committee, there are people who, when they saw the performance of what Honorable Muratsetla refers to as learners who come from dysfunctional schools and disadvantaged schools, wanted an investigation to be done, almost similar to what happened during apartheid. If you are black, you get distinctions. They'll say, no, there's something wrong. You can't be given those results. You only had to get anything less than a distinction. Now, truth be told, we know that previously performing schools were your former Model C schools. Now, Dr. Stephen Taylor and Dr. Martin Gustafsson did an analysis in 2005, which indicated that 80% of bachelors came from 20% of our schools, in the main former Model C schools. That reality has changed. Now we know that 64% of bachelors come from quintile 1 to 3, which the National Development Plan and the diagnostic report used to refer to the schools as dysfunctional schools. So things have changed, and even your quality results come from the schools. I'll speak to this a little more later on. The issue of infrastructure on ECD, the sad news, honorable members, is that we're not doing well in spending this grant. And I know that some of the officials were saying is because when we inherited this from social development on the 1st of April, you know, the grant had not been spent and plans were not in place. There is money for infrastructure for ECD, and that money must be spent. I agree with you, Honorable Muratsetla. If we don't invest in ECD, then we don't have